talked about the rights in both in sports, in entertainment, in politics, and all. Now, I'm going to ask you a very important question. All of your advocacy for the rights and inclusion of people living with disability, or those who are they have one impairment or the other, does it also affect that disabled man who is begging on the street? Does it also affect those children on the street? Does it also affect that woman who has elephantiasis on the street? Is it all inclusive? That's what I'm asking.
Yes, of course. In every society, you have the elites, the middle class, and those at the lower cadre of society. And of course, it doesn't just affect only people with disabilities; it affects those without disabilities too. Not only PWDs beg on the streets; there are able-bodied people who are also. I mean, looking at what the country is, there a socioeconomic hardship. Even as people with disabilities, those of us who are a bit okay, people who are without disabilities come to us for assistance. So it's not peculiar, but you see those with disabilities more because of the barriers that society puts in their way for survival. Okay, for example, if you talk about women with disabilities or girls with disabilities, they are several times likely to face more challenges than women and girls without disabilities.
Right.
So, and this is why it is important that disability is mainstreamed at the design stage, not as afterthought. Okay. So, in our advocacies, we of course speak for everybody, whether you're on the street or you're in the home being hidden, because it's not only those that are home on the streets that are suffering. There are a lot of children with disabilities or people with disabilities that are locked up in their homes. Are hidden by their families or parents and all of that. So we speak for everybody.
Now let's begin this conversation first taking our quote from Jean Lebrecht, who once said, "I wanted to be part of the world, but I didn't see anyone like me in it." Okay, so we'll take our next quote, and this one is from Robert Hensel, who once said, "There is no greater disability in society than the inability to see a person as more." My next one will be from Stella Young, who once said that my disability exists not because I use a wheelchair, but because the broader environment isn't accessible. And that said, I will take my last quote. This one is from Lois Braille, who once said, "We must be treated as equals, and communication is the way we can bring about this." All right, now let's see how this quote relates to what we'll be discussing today. Very warm greetings and welcome to The Conversation. We're reaching you from Kaftan's Television Studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. I am Annabelle Oji. I'm sure you're wondering why we're taking quotes with regards to disability. That's what we'll be discussing today on the show. We'll be talking about disability inclusion, we'll be talking about development, and we've got loads of things to discuss about and how we can actually make our world safe and free from stigmatization, especially in today's Nigeria. My guest on the show today is Dr. Adebukola Adebayo, I beg your pardon, who is a disability and inclusive development specialist. He'll be talking to us on the show today. Good morning, Dr. Adebukola.
Good morning, Annabelle. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for honoring our invitation. It's great to have you on the show this morning.
Thank you.
All right. So, yes, we like to always go general before we go specific here on The Conversation. But before we go ahead, how are you, Dr. Adebukola?
I'm fine. I'm good.
Even though whenever I ask that question, most people will say that's a rhetorical question. So what do you want me to tell you? I'm fine. But really, how are you, Dr. Adebukola?
Yeah, I'm fine. We are fine. We are fine within the context of what our country and the world has to offer us. So where we have to find a way to exist. So, I mean, I'm here in the studios. I don't think I look otherwise. Yeah.
Most definitely. Okay, so like I said, we always like to start from, we like to always climb the tree from the top and not from the bottom or from the middle. Now let's start by getting up close and personal with you. How exactly were you able to lose your sight? What happened? Was it from childbirth or it just happened along the way?
Okay, usually people with disabilities are either congenital from birth or acquired later in life. Maybe, of course, when you see later in life, from the very day the child is born, or maybe as he or she grows in life. So, of course, this might be as a result of illnesses of any form, accidents, and all of that. So, for me, it's congenital from birth. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it all started from birth for you. How's it been so far?
Well, very good.
Especially growing up.
Yeah, for me, it's been okay. It's been nice. Again, it depends on the context of life you were exposed to. Beginning from the family end, how supportive the family is, what level of knowledge or awareness or understanding they have, and the immediate community one lives in. So all of these factors shape how a person with disability who has acquired either disability either from birth or later in life is exposed to. So if you're exposed to a family that is hostile, that is probably seeing this as a cause, from the negative perspective, of course it will affect the child with disability negatively. If also in the community you live in, they also uphold negative behaviors or perspectives of disability, so it will also affect the person with disability. So, but for me, I think I had a fair share of both sides.
Okay.
But most importantly, I think I had a very supportive family, and community was a mixed bag of both the good, the bad, the ugly.
Okay.
And when I say community, I mean from your immediate home community, your residential community, your school community, and other social communities that we are exposed to as a human being. You know, so even right now, as we exist, we still live in one community or multiple communities.
Right.
And so all of this shape how people relate with us. So for me, I think I had, like I said, I had supportive family. Not too much orientation within the immediate community, not too much awareness as we have it now. You know, so but because you experience positivity from the family, then it's likely that you are going to be able to integrate to a large extent. So I played with other people like every other child, and I went to school like every other child. The opportunities for education were quite few then. Here we are talking about almost 40 years ago. So the opportunities for education was still restricted to just special schools. Very few of them in the country, you know, and of course, from there we moved to special schools only exist at the primary level anyway. So from there we moved to secondary schools, which is a regular school, and to other levels of education, which are also a regular, schools where everybody goes as well. So, but the good thing is, at that level, you are dealing with some people with some level of awareness.
Okay.
People with some level of professional and technical capacity, and so the way they will relate with you is different from how every other man on the street who has little or no knowledge will relate with you. So it's a mixture of everything. You know, I don't know how to explain. You can write a book on this. So it's a mixture of everything. But the good thing, like I said, is that we have been able to navigate this through. But the foundation that gave us that strength is the home front,
Right.
where we were not segregated or discriminated or abused, or we faced virtually no negative barriers, so to say.
All
And
right.
so when a child has that, is able to get that level of foundation
From the beginning.
from the beginning, it's likely that he or she will survive, so be able to engage other barriers that he or she may. But once, and one of the problems people with disabilities face is that once they face that challenge from the home front, once they are not accepted within their immediate families by their mothers, their parents, or their siblings, once they are not accepted at that level, it's usually always difficult for the child to develop the positive attitude, the necessary mentality that he or she needs to now navigate other barriers that they may face in society. That's why we keep saying that the family is very, very important.
All right.
In all of this.
Okay, so now you've actually made quite a number of salient points that we will draw out from even as we look at the next 40 minutes of our time. Now, Dr. Adebukola, you talked about the foundation, how necessary, how important the love that you got from your family, how it was. And I hear you also talk about something about, you said something about most people see it as a curse. Some people see it as a blessing. I've come to understand, because most of the interviews I've had with some people with disability, I come to understand that some people would give birth to the child and say God has cursed them by giving them a child who has one form of disability or the other, be it autism, be it cerebral palsy, or physical disability. So if parents have that kind of mindset, it definitely will trickle down to what you find in the society, the immediate family, the society at large. So if you have, for people who are watching us right now, who have such mentality, Dr. Adebukola, how do you deal? Advise us.
Okay, well, they say seeing is believing. So I'm here. You said Dr. Adebukola. Doctor, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm an academic doctor, PhD.
Right.
So, and like I've laid the background, I've lived with this all my life. So if I can get through to where I am now, then I think it's just, like you say, seeing is evidential enough for any parent who might have a child with one form of disability or the other. Okay. So the world has gone past that stage when you look at people with challenges or impairments as if they are different. They are everywhere. We are all human beings. We have life in us. We live like, the only thing is that we have certain peculiarities that things that are peculiar to us. The impairment, okay, the inability to use one aspect of your body or the other. But seeing where we are in the 21st century, technology has helped to overcome many of these barriers that, the fears of survival of existence that many people might be worried about. Okay, how is he going to live? How is he going to go to school? We went to school. How is he going to work?
And even got to the doctorate level.
So how is he going to work and earn a living? We earn a living, we work. How is he going to have a family? We have our own families. We set up our own families. We live like every other everyday people. So and we work with every other person. So I think the ignorance is reducing. The level of awareness is increasing. It's just for people to seek more information. It's for society to provide the necessary enablements, for families to be able to get the necessary support. Once a child is diagnosed with one form of impairment or the other, what we expect at this level, especially where now that we have disability laws at national and state levels, where we are now having disability agencies at national and state levels, we expect to see systems that provide immediate support for families that are blessed with children or persons with one disability or the other. So once they can get that support, immediately a member of the family is diagnosed to have one impairment or the other, then the challenges for that family reduces to the barest minimum.
Okay.
What happens when you have negative attitudes sustained in the family against children or adults with disability is because there is no support, there is no orientation, there is no um, uh, 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 there is no, I mean, just there's no support, there's no awareness, you know. So, and when all of these things do not exist, then the family begin to guess, they live in fear, they don't know what to do, you know. And of course, there are different types of impairments, you know, there are different classes of impairments. So, and when any family, any member of a family presents with this challenge, then and they don't have all the necessary support, then they can begin to, you know, face that, you know, express that fear, and of course fear
So
will
the
then
stigmas.
no, it begins with fear
Oh, okay.
of the unknown. Oh, this is a child, how do I engage, how do I treat this child, and so on. And then that fear begins to take them into other things like negative behaviors. You know, they then begin to guess, okay, maybe it's a spiritual thing, maybe it's you know, they begin to get, mostly they drift towards spiritual issues. They begin to go to spiritual faith-based organizations to seek help. I'm not saying there's no help in faith-based organization, but that's not really where to go.
Okay, so Dr. Adebukola, let me divert a little. Let me put you on the spot. Were you subjected to any of these?
No. Unfortunately, and you see, the irony is that my own parents were I mean, illiterate. They didn't. None of them were educated in that sense, you know. And maybe they just were in they were in the right place at the right time. They were able to get the kind of support I'm talking about.
Okay.
Okay. So I remember then in Luth, if you had a child with visual impairment, I think the hospital will refer you to the schools that were available at that time.
Okay.
Okay, so there was that connect between the hospital and some other service providers, which we, of course, we don't see more of it again now. Okay, more of the hospitals that are existing now, they don't know how to connect people that have been diagnosed with one impairment or the other with necessary services that exist. So I think that was why the missing link is for many people, especially where in states or locations where there are no such services. So that's why we are advocating that government should ensure that these services, you know, spread across.
All right.
It shouldn't be limited to one or few places. It should be almost in every local government, you know. But where you don't have those services, the hospitals don't even know where to refer you to after being diagnosed or confirmed to have that disability, especially if the disability or impairment is not reversible.
All right. So now, because you talked about how much we now have laws, legislations with regards to how people with disabilities are being helped and all, I recall that there's a department, there's a commission, and you have the president has a special advisor on disability matters. So how exactly is the inclusion? What are the discussions you're having, and what is the inclusion like? Is it far better than what it used to be before now? Dr. Adebukola, I'll ask you two questions and I'd like you to take them together because I know that you can help us to unbundle them together. So now that's one on the side. But then, and secondly, looking back at 2023 elections, we hear how much they would bring about inclusion of people with disability, because I remember talking to the INEC boss at the time, and then he talked about bringing magnifying glasses, bringing all of that to help those with disabilities. But after that election, a lot of it didn't go down well with some other person. So for you, what will you say with regards to the inclusion when it comes to bringing people with disability, either in election matters, in political matters, or even in administration?
Okay. Like I said earlier, in our time when we were growing up, we didn't have this level of exposure, level of awareness. Every sector is now talking about disabilities. It wasn't the case in the 80s, in the 90s. Okay, so a lot of efforts from disability organizations, individuals, you know, advocacy struggles led to where we are now. We now have a National Disability Act, and we have a National Disability Commission.
Right.
And we also have disability laws in up to, I think, 20 states at the last count. And I think about 10 or so of those states have set up their disability agencies. So that's very good. We weren't this at this level just 10, 15 years back. Okay. So, but one thing we must also note that having the law is one thing.
Right.
Having the commission is another thing.
Right.
Having people with disabilities run those agencies is another thing.
And then
Now,
functional.
Functioning, delivering the goods now is another thing. Setting up those agencies to deliver the goods is another thing. Funding them properly to be able to deliver the goods is another thing. Right. I think that's where we are now. So, anybody without problems is probably dead. Any society without problems is probably not existing. So there will always be one layer of problem to solve. After, as you solve one, the other layer comes up. So the challenge we are facing now is the challenge of governance of those disability agencies, the challenge of implementation of those disability laws and policies that we now have. There is a lot that is to be done. Okay, there's a lot, from education to health to issue of elections that you just talked about. Okay, so that's where we are now. And one of the major factors of this challenge is the fact that we are just delving into disability inclusion in Nigeria. The capacity gap is very wide. Okay, if you go around our tertiary institutions, very few of them are offering course, and of course, everything in society always begins with the knowledge base. So when you don't have the human capacity to drive a process, to drive a new idea, then the the level of impact is going to be very low. So at the moment, we're still struggling with how to build the knowledge base that will help us build the human capital that we need to implement this, to run these disability agencies, and to implement the laws themselves. That you're a person with disability does not mean you have all the knowledge you need. Okay? I'm a person with disability. I have lived experience. But lived experience is not enough, technically, to administer an agency, a disability agency. There's a lot of knowledge building, capacity building that we need to, know about. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
So that is still the first level we are trying to struggle with.
Okay, sorry, I had to butt in there. Is it what you have right now, especially from that commission, the Disability Commission, and then the advice coming from the presidency or to the presidency in terms of inclusion? Is it just about lived experiences or technical experiences or academic experiences?
No, there are some.
What's the reality?
There is some. The reality is that there is some, but very few. Nigeria is a huge country. We have we are estimated to have up to 30 or more million persons with disabilities in Nigeria, using the World Bank and WHO prevalence rate of 15%. So 15% of about 200 and something million people is so a bit over 30 million. And 30 million is the population of so many. There are so many countries that are not even up to 30 million. So it's like having a nation of persons with disabilities within Nigeria that you have to cater for. And so all their needs, like I said, cut across sectors. Okay? So some capacity exists. I'm a specialist in disability rights and inclusive development, but many of me are very few in the country. And like I said, many of us, even those of us who exist, probably have to go abroad to acquire some skills. How many of us who are interested in this field are able to go abroad to acquire skills? The best we have at the moment is special education. And special education is just one aspect of disability inclusion. Okay? There's inclusion in health, there's inclusion in transport, there's inclusion in social protection, there's inclusion in everywhere, in every sector you can imagine. Okay? In aviation, there's disability inclusion, and so on and so forth. In sports, there's disability. So there's nothing you talk about on the planet Earth that does not have its dimension of disability inclusion. And I tell you, all of this needs experts. Even in the built industry, in the built industry, architects, surveyors, presently there are no courses provided to build these skills. around disability inclusion in each of these fields I've been talking about. Okay, I did political science up to PhD. I never heard the word disability while I was running all my courses from first degree to last degree.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so but we built capacity, technical capacity along the line. Do you get it? Lots of workshops, trainings, courses here and there helped us to build capacity. So the first level of implementation now for all these disability agencies that I talk about is that they are working towards the process of developing a knowledge base, a sustainable knowledge base that will help us build the human capacity that we need. They have a special advisor to the president and some people working in disability commission. It's not enough. It's not enough. I told you there are almost 20 states that have their disability laws and they are working towards implementing it. All these capacities are needed across the states too. Okay, so it's going to take some time to build the quantum of human capacity that we need.
How optimistic
are you, govern these agencies and to implement the law and deliver the services that people with disabilities need.
How optimistic are you with the time that you just talked about, looking at 2030, few years to the Sustainable Development Goals achievement?
Fortunately, the Sustainable Development Goals, up to about 10 of those goals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 16 and 17. About 10 of those goals, like I said, have about 13 targets and quite a number of indicators that are specific to disabilities. So there are efforts ongoing to ensure that these goals are achieved. Disability components of these goals are achieved. Part of the effort is the setting up, is the enactment of these laws and the setting up of the agencies. So what is going on now, like I said, for example, with the National Commission, I have some knowledge about that, is that they are working to develop, a capacity building modules in collaboration with tertiary institutions to ensure that we can build the needed manpower to manage these agencies and to deliver across sectors. That is ongoing. And that also dovetails into your last question, the other question you asked about elections. Again, it's about capacity. INEC was not set up ab initio to deliver disability inclusive elections. The commission, INEC, is also building its own capacity. It's just learning on how to make its processes and activities disability inclusive. Okay. Many of us have worked with INEC, supported INEC technically, and we are still supporting INEC to achieve all of this. So the process is ongoing. The last election that you talked about, was different completely from, let's say, 2007, 2010, 2015 elections. Okay. So the level of disability inclusion and disability orientation of our elections have increased with the 2023 elections compared to previous elections. So it's a gradual process that will keep improving. Of course, probably not at the pace we as people with disabilities want, but that's why advocacy has to go on consistently to keep pushing government. Because one of the major problems that many of our disability agencies and even other MDAs who want to mainstream disability are facing is the poor funding. Okay, disability is still not in the front burner. It's usually in most cases an afterthought. And until MDAs of government and other sectors of society like the private sector and so on, and the development sector too, until they make disability an integral part of their planning and budgeting, then we will continue to, drag what we could have achieved in maybe 1 year. It will take us 5 or more years, to achieve.
We have a lot of things to discuss, but then we need to go on a quick break, and when we return, we'll continue this conversation with Dr. Adebukola Adebayo. Join us again. If you just joined us, this is The Conversation, reaching you from Kaftan's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. If you just joined us, you've actually missed out on the first part of the show, but then you can still join in the second part as we still chatting with Dr. Adebukola Adebayo, who is a disability and inclusive development specialist. All right, Dr. Adebukola, before we went on that break, we've actually made quite a number of salient points, but then let's talk about advocacy, especially your advocacy. Now, you happen to be a disability and inclusive development specialist. You talk about advocacy with regards to disability rights. I hear you during the first segment of the show, you talked about the rights in both in sports, in entertainment, in politics, and all. Now, I'm going to ask you a very important question. All of your advocacy for the rights and inclusion of people living with disability, or those who are they have one impairment or the other, does it also affect that disabled man who is begging on the street? Does it also affect those children on the street? Does it also affect that woman who has elephantiasis on the street? Is it all inclusive? That's what I'm asking.
Yes, of course. In every society, you have the elites, the middle class, and those at the lower cadre of society. And of course, it doesn't just affect only people with disabilities; it affects those without disabilities too. Not only PWDs beg on the streets; there are able-bodied people who are also. I mean, looking at what the country is, their socioeconomic hardship. Even as people with disabilities, those of us who are a bit okay, people who are without disabilities come to us for assistance. So it's not peculiar, but you see those with disabilities more because of the barriers that society puts in their way for survival, and that's why, of course, when you are planning socioeconomic programs, it is expected that you look first at those with disabilities, because there are people who are always twice likely, to be poorer than others in society. Okay, for example, if you talk about women with disabilities or girls with disabilities, they are several times likely to face more challenges than women and girls without disabilities.
Right.
So, and this is why it is important that disability is mainstreamed at the design stage, not as afterthought. Okay, so in our advocacies, we of course speak for everybody, whether you're on the streets or you're in the home being hidden, because it's not only those that are home on the streets that are suffering. There are a lot of children with disabilities or people with disabilities that are locked up in their homes, are hidden by their families or parents, and all of that. So we speak for everybody. We are asking for programs that take people with disabilities off the streets, put those that can go to school into schools, put those that can go into one vocation or the other into those vocations, and so that we can become productive members of society and not burden or liabilities to society. Okay, developed countries make the best use of all available hands, manpower in their environment. But the moment you continue to lock some people out, then the burden that society has to carry will continue to increase. But if we increase the potentials for everybody to be productive, to contribute to development of society, then it reduces the burden, social burdens that society has to carry. So if I'm a person with disability, now I am productive, I earn a living, I will not be a burden to my family, immediate family. Rather, I'll be an asset. I'll be able to contribute socioeconomically to the welfare of the family. Okay, so that is the way it ought to be. And when we advocate, we consider every level of persons with disabilities. We advocate for those who need social protection, those who are the poorest of the poor among persons with disabilities.
All right.
Okay, we advocate for those who are in school, and that's why we talk of inclusive education. At the moment, there is the National Inclusive Education Policy, and there are about 14 or 15 states have this policy as well, trying to implement it. And what does it say? It says that let's make all the schools accessible to every child, regardless of their ability or disability. Because special schools are too few and very expensive to manage. Okay? And it's not the best way of using the scarce education resources you have. So when you make every school in, let's say, FCT here, accessible, it means that if there's a school near my house and I'm a child with disability, it's easier for my parents to put me there. Then
Right.
let's say I live in Kuje, and then I have to go to Maraba or somewhere very far
Oh,
to
wow.
attend the only special school that is there. Okay, so we are advocating for those in schools that they should have access to quality and functional education. We also advocate for those who have left school. Maybe they are not able to progress to higher levels, and they need one vocational skill or the other, that they should be given such opportunity. Okay, we have few vocational training centers across the country, rehabilitation centers, but they are few and far in between. At least we should have one or more in every state.
All right.
We are also advocating for those of us who have schooled, are well schooled, have graduated, we have a degree or whatever, and are able to work, because that's another level of advocacy. The work environment, employers of labor still discriminate against people with disabilities, regardless of their qualification and their capability to do the job. They look at the disability more than the ability of these people to do the job. The National Disability Commission has developed what we call a national framework on access to work for persons with disabilities. That framework is to ensure that persons with disabilities who are qualified to work are able to get formal employment, or are able to set up their own private businesses.
All right.
Okay, so this advocacy, I'm just trying to tell you that the advocacy is cut across.
All right.
From those that are downtrodden up to those that are elites who need one, who are able to work. And so all of this advocacy is put together. If as a yield results, will continue to reduce the number of persons with disabilities who are dependent on, who cannot do things for themselves. But if we're able to go to school, we acquire knowledge and skills. If we're able to come out of school and get work, employed, and of course the Disability Act says that 5% of the working of the workforce of every organization should be reserved for persons, qualified persons with disabilities. So if every employer organization, if they abide by this provision of the Disability Act, I mean, you know what that means. Okay,
definitely.
So the advocacy, just to answer your question, the advocacy cuts across everybody.
All right.
We are talking about ensuring that social protection, those that are in the lowest ladder, are able to get some form of succor.
All right.
To take them out of that vulnerability status and make them stable and able to live a meaningful life, in the society.
All right. Now, taking a cue from where you landed with regards to employment for people living with disability, it should actually go beyond just employing people living with disability. Now, what are the steps that these organizations or these employers of labor need to put in place? You have buildings without ramps. You have you should have signs and all of that. Talk to us about this so that people, employers of labor, should understand this. If they truly want to be bring in the disabled people, or they want to be inclusive, it means they have to take all of this into cognizance. So school us on this.
Absolutely. Let me just start from the education thing again, because they connect. Okay, so with education now, we are working with the stakeholders, with NUC, all the tertiary institutions, to ensure that education is accessible. The National Commission has developed a standard operating procedure on access to education for PWDs, and that cuts across from pre-primary to tertiary. So if we're able to access education, it increases our employment opportunities. And so employers will not now think that, you don't have the requisite qualification to work. Now, having sorted out that, the employer, especially the private sector now, and that's appreciate the level of awareness that we have achieved over the years. They, on their own, in our own time, in 25 or 30 years back, if you approach the private sector, a typical any of these multinationals for employment, in the first place, they don't even know how to employ you. They don't know, even if they want to employ you, even if they want to, sympathetically, they want to employ you, they don't know how to do so. They don't know where to place you. They don't even have an understanding of what you can do. So, but we thank God that we've now, in the last 25, 30 years, overcome that problem. For example, we have what you call the NBD, Nigeria Business Disability Network.
Okay.
This network is comprised of private sector employers, the big employers. If you allow me to mention some of them, the MTNs of this world, Access Banks of this world, Unilevers of this, and so many other multinationals and big players in the private sector, they now understand what disability inclusion in the workplace is. And on their own, they've come together in this network to drive the process of employing, not just providing employment for persons with disabilities, but also supporting other initiatives that have to do with persons with disabilities. So we have that network now. They just had a conference about a month or so ago. They have that annual conference, diversity and inclusion conference, where they brainstorm and come up with new initiatives, learn on new ideas on how to work, with persons with disabilities, how to make their work environments work with, comfortable for persons with disabilities.
All of these resolutions they give, are they practicable?
Absolutely.
Or just work on paper?
They are now employing
on
persons with disabilities. It's not a competitive thing. Everybody wants to be the first, the best in disability inclusiveness. Okay. So they are trying their best, and that's why they came up with that network. It's a network that's being supported by many development partners, including site savers and so on. So they are coming up with these initiatives. That's to tell you that we've long left where we used to be.
Right.
We are not where we want to be yet, but at least we've taken a giant leap forward. And I think it's a sustainable leap that we have taken forward. So that is ongoing. Now, when it comes to complying with accessibility, physical accessibility or digital accessibility, that's of course what is in the Disability Act. Okay, several sections of Disability Act provides for different forms of accessibility that everybody in the country is supposed to comply with. So the commission, the National Disability Commission itself, has developed what we call a national accessibility framework or standards, okay, which has been ratified by the Federal Executive Council of Nigeria, by the President. Okay, that accessibility regulation is now being implemented. Efforts are ongoing to implement it, to ensure that there are monitoring mechanisms across the country to ensure that people comply. And I mean, it's not just about punishing those who fail to comply, it's about even encouraging, motivating everybody to comply, rewarding compliance as well. Okay, so there are certificates.
So there's a reward for compliance.
Yes, there are certificates that people who are showing best practice in terms of compliance will also be awarded. So it's not just, and of course those who refuse to comply will be punished. I'm not saying that the punishment will not be, but we are not just lining towards punitive measures alone. We are also trying to, the commission is also trying to, I'm just speaking as a Nigerian with disability, okay, and with some level of information and exposure to some information. I'm sure the commission, if you approach the commission, they will be able to give you more. But I'm just telling you what I know that exists. So there's that disability accessibility regulation that's in force now, which of course efforts are being made to implement it. So with all of this in place, I just talked about the network, the Nigerian Business Disability Network, and these are comprised of big players in the private sector. I've told you of what the commission is doing. So if you add all of these efforts together, I believe that, I mean, you mentioned 2030, Agenda 2030. Right. I believe that if we conscientiously implement all of these things, that, I mean, these bits of efforts here and there, if the commission is able to connect all of this together, I think by 2030, we should have also improved. I mean, the issue of data is also there, because if you don't know how many we are, you won't know how to plan for us. We are just using estimates based on World Bank prevalence of 15%. Okay, prevalence rate of 15%. We might be more, we might be fewer. Okay, we need more accurate figure. So many researchers, some will tell you we are 10%, some will tell you we are 7%, some will tell you we don't want all these multiple data sources. Now, as we speak, effort is ongoing, working with the National Population Commission to ensure that the next census that is coming is the tools, the enumeration tools that will be used to collect data during the next census has disability components in it. Okay, there's what we call the Washington Group question sets that has modules on how to measure disability prevalence. Okay, that Washington Group question set is the globally standardized tool for collecting disability data. So that tool is currently being adopted by National Population Census, Population Commission, and embedded in the enumeration instruments that will be used to collect data during the next census.
All right.
So if we succeed with that, it will bring us close to having a very accurate data of persons with disabilities. And then if we now have this data in our hands, Disability Commission and other MDAs, either at federal, state, or local government levels, will be able to mine this data and use it to provide services to persons with disabilities across sectors, especially in education, in health, in social protection, in the area of public transportation, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely spot on. I'd like to see things like that happen very soon. All right, even as we begin to wind down, Dr. Adebukola, I'm going to ask you a personal question.
Yeah.
Tell us what has been your worst moment ever, and how were you able to deal with it? Because we have people living with disability who I've had to hold some people, like when they almost broke down and they didn't know how to manage it. So tell us your own story, your own experience, and how you were able to manage it so that they can learn from you.
First and foremost, like I said earlier, the context that we lived in our time is like a 360 turnaround. Things have changed. You can hear all these things I told you now. They didn't exist in our time. So we had more barriers to deal with in our own time. The level of the quantum of opportunities that exist now in terms of access to education, access to this, to that, it was not there was no Disability Act, there was no Disability Commission, there was all of this Nigerian Business Disability Network, all these things were not existing in our time.
Okay.
So yes, no, I'm going somewhere. Let me learn.
Because I want to hear like your own experience.
I will. I'm going somewhere. I have to put it in context.
Okay.
Because you see, if you don't put it in context, you might be giving people the wrong information.
Okay.
So the context is that what I experienced then, the factors that caused what I experienced then have changed to a large extent. For example, when I was, in school, when I attended the primary school, a special school for the blind. But today, you have so many regular schools that blind people can go into in states where they are practicing inclusive education. In states like Lagos State, like Kaduna State, like Enugu, and so on. Okay? So, and even in the FCT here. So there are options. So if during my time there was inclusive schools, I probably would have gone to one of those inclusive schools very close to my house instead of going to far distance to a special school. That's one. Okay? I went to a secondary school, regular King's College. I went to University of Lagos.
Wow.
All of these schools are regular schools.
Right.
King's College is one of the Federal Unity schools, okay, in Lagos. But the level of orientation in that school at that time in managing students with disability is higher now. They didn't, the gaps that we saw in our time have reduced. I'm not saying they have vanished, but they have reduced to a significant extent. So the kind of challenges I faced, if you go and ask those there now, their own challenge might be different. Okay? So, and then the same thing when we went to tertiary institutions and so on and so on. And even now that we are in the labor market. I remember then when I was job hunting as a fresh graduate, I went to Lagos State government to ask for work. They didn't give me. In fact, I was told that people like me cannot work in Lagos in the civil service. That was almost 30 years back. But today, I remember in 2017, the then governor of Lagos State employed over 300 PWDs at the same time. Imagine if that opportunity was existing during my time. Okay? I wouldn't have faced that discrimination. So if you want to accuse Lagos State, for example, of discrimination now, of what I faced then, you can see that has been overtaken by events. Because in one shop, the Lagos State government employed up to 300. No other state government have ever done that. Okay? And then they have a disability law and a disability agency in Lagos State now. Probably if that was existing 30 years back, I wouldn't have been a victim of discrimination.
All right.
in terms of employment. So for me, my joy is that all those pains I went through in my time, I'm now also living to see that the change has come.
Right.
You get it? That's so I don't remember my pains again.
Ah.
Because I know that now what we should be telling the younger ones and the generation of those with disabilities who are just getting into disability community now is that they now should look at the opportunities that are available.
Right.
Okay, opportunities to go to school, opportunity to get jobs. There's almost everybody. There's an NBDN now that is providing the opportunities. There are more development organizations working on disability. More state and federal, more states are keen into disability inclusion. So the opportunities are widening. So it is for us as people with disabilities to support those that are coming and ensure that those challenges we went through, they no longer go through it. Because especially more so because the opportunities are available now. There is a law, there are laws, there are agencies, there are opportunities across sectors. So we should now be looking at how to take advantage. And that's why I talked about the issue of governance and delivery of services. That the problem is no longer having a disability law. If I is a norm now, any state that doesn't have a disability law now, you'll be looking at yourself as odd state. You know, so we are seeing that those things now exist. The problem now, the challenge we're now dealing with is how to have good governance of those disability agencies, how to have enough human capacity to deliver, to manage those agencies and to deliver the services that we desire. That for me is the challenge now, or the 21st century challenge for persons with disabilities in Nigeria.
I actually like the fact that you talked about the joy you have now, seeing that things have really turned 360 degree. It brings so much joy to hear you say such. Now, as we begin to wind down, my last question for you, or my last word, would like to get your last word to those living with one disability or the other, with parents who have children with special needs, and even also to the society. Now, we're not talking only to parents. We're not talking only to people living with disability. We're also talking to the government. We're also talking to the society at large, how to treat people with first love, empathy, and then inclusion. What are your last words to people?
For me, I think everybody out there, in every Nigerian out there, you are, as long as you are living, you are a disability risk until you are dead. So what we're asking every one of us to do is to ensure that we contribute to a society that is inclusive of everybody. So that if we promote disability inclusion, then we are also including everybody. Okay? So there's nothing you do for persons with disabilities that will not in the short or long run be beneficial to every other person. Okay? So we're asking that all these negative attitudes, persons with disabilities are not demons, they are not spirits, they are not a curse to anybody. I mean, it's been there since biblical or Quranic days. We saw it in the Bible when people asked Jesus, "Oh, this person is blind. Is he because of his sin?" He said, "No." Okay? So many things, so many verses of the Bible and the Quran are there for reference. So disability is not a cause, it's not what do you call it? It's just one of those things. It's one of those things that can happen to anybody. We've seen judges go blind or go deaf. We've seen accountants, architects, and so many people. Anybody can acquire disability anytime anyway. So when we make our society disability inclusive, then it makes it a safer society for everybody. And we are saying that governments should not just stop at setting up disability commissions, either at state or federal level. They need to fund those commissions very well. They need to ensure that disability inclusion permits every other sector. Education, health, hospitality, transportation, and so on, agri. You know, they need to ensure, and even from the federal to the local government, we need to bring in local governments into this discourse. Okay, we shouldn't leave it just to states and federal governments alone. Every 774 local governments and the 6 area councils in Abuja should have a disability office. Okay, and that's when we are showing seriousness of being a disability inclusive country.
All right. So in 1 minute, if you can help us, how optimistic are you, and how joyful does it, what is the level of joy it brings to your heart when you see look at state like Akwa Ibom state having someone who at the helm of affair, that's the governor, who is also who is an albino, and then before now people would say you can't see things like that happening. So in the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years, how soon do you see presidents, governors, leaders springing out from
we are getting there, Annabelle. We are getting there. We used to have a governor in Nasarawa State,
yes,
Makora, who was deaf. You know, we had governors who had one challenge or the other, even though not obvious. And now in Akwa Ibom, we have a person with albinism who is also the governor. So it's just, and of course, persons with disabilities are also now getting up the ladder. We are getting presidential appointments. We have an SSA to the president on disability. We have a National Disability Commission headed by an executive secretary. Is a person with disability, and so many people with disabilities work in that commission. So, in the next 10 years, we'll have produced a huge population of elites among persons with disabilities who will be able to vie for elective positions and all of that. So we are changing the narrative. It's not going to be a day's job. It's a gradual transformation that our country is going through as far as disability inclusion is concerned. Of course, it's a development issue, and life development continues all through life as long as the world exists. So it's not a one-stop thing that we'll have gotten over it in 2050. No, as long as there's life, there will always be disability, and there will always be different challenges that will be presenting itself for us to deal with, be it in technology, in space technology, in artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth. So there will always be all of this for us to deal with. What we only want is, we want to see more commitment from all levels of government, from the private sector, from the development sector, and from the media, just like you are doing. You know, we want to see more of this. We want programs. I mean, you can call me to come and discuss any other thing apart from just disability. We want to be seen and heard across all sectors, not just disability. And I think that will help us to gain more grounds and make our country a more disability inclusive nation.
That is a fine place to anchor. Thank you so much, Dr. Adebukola Adebayo, Disability and Inclusive Development Specialist. It's been a wonderful time having this talk with you.
Thank you.
And then thank you for sharing your time with us. Look at me having goosebumps all over because I really enjoy having this conversation. It has been a very wonderful time having this conversation with Dr. Adebukola, and he is a disability inclusive specialist. I'm sure you must have been rightly educated, entertained, and informed. This is The Conversation, and we'll be having all of these conversations every time. So don't miss The Conversation. Remember that whatever you do, remember you're just one shot away from being a disabled person. So treat everyone with love, with empathy, and see everyone as your own brother. I'll see you again next time. My name is Annabelle Oji. Good morning.